everybody. Welcome back to Where Credit is Due. Today, we're diving into a topic every organization swears they've mastered, and not many do it well. Building a risk scoring model that doesn't collapse the moment your customer's CFO quits or the biggest buyer defects. Hello, I'm Matt Skudera.
And I'm Mike Bevilacqua. And we've all seen it. A customer looks stable right up until the day your phone lights up with unexpected disruption. Then suddenly everybody becomes an expert in hindsight, like a Monday morning quarterback. So today we're talking about how to build scoring models that earn their keep, models that predict, quantify, and inform decisions before the damage hits.
And Mike, today we're going to cover internal data, external indicators, sentiment. I think that's a key one for us. AI, and yes, the power of peer networking, because sometimes the fastest early warnings come from colleagues saying something's just off here.
Can I say to that, yes, yes, yes? That's a key one for sure. So let's delve into why most models fail. Let's start with the hard truth. These risk models fail because they're built on stale data and outdated logic. They're more checklist than analytics.
Mike, that's so true. And if your model relies slowly on financial statements, maybe older than your laptop, you're not forecasting risk. You're just doing historical reenactments, and how true that is.
Sure is. But, a successful model treats risk like a mosaic. You didn't know that we were painters, did you, Matt? Think about internal patterns, external signs, sentiment, or the insight you get from fellow credit pros, and the picture gets pretty darn blurry fast.
Yeah, it certainly does. I think you painted a perfect portrait, Mike. Let's bring this to the next step for today's podcast. I want to talk a little bit about accuracy, and it really begins with combing through the right pieces. There are three major categories I think folks need to address that really drive accuracy. And AI is really the glue that binds them. And that's the new piece I want people to get used to in today's podcast. Right. For me, there's three components that should be addressed. One, there's internal data, right? It's your direct behavioral history that you have. It's resident in your system. It's the core, it's the foundation. There's external data and what the world knows about the customer. And there's so many data sources out there that you need to think about what's appropriate for you. And the third piece that I'm not sure everybody's using these days, but to me is critical, and that's customer sentiment. It's the signals that maybe have hiding in a tone of conversation, maybe in responsiveness, and or their behavior that you want to be able to capture as you think about accuracy in today's modeling world.
Yeah, Matt, when you integrate those three pieces, you move from a good guess to probabilistic prediction. And it's the sum of the parts are really very, very valuable and integral to each other. And if you think about it, it's like switching from a weather forecast to actually looking out the window.
Mike, it's funny you say that. The weather forecast for me today was snow all day long. I didn't see a flake at all. It's all rain. So you're right. But accuracy is important, right? Looking out the window. And networking matters here too. I don't want to lose that perspective. And we're talking about credit scoring and risk models. Sometimes the most valuable signal is maybe somebody that you know in your network, and they may indicate something like they've tightened credit or they have reviewed again or changed a cycle because of something that they know about a particular customer and or industry. It's so important, that networking piece.
Yeah, and the key there, Matt, is of course they're telling you something they've done, so it's already in the rearview mirror versus ever saying, "Hey, I'm about to." That's a big no-no, and it's against the law. But I also think networking and being around credit professionals, the value that you get from that far outweighs any T&E cost that you ever incur. I could tell you that from my experiences with PepsiCo. I saved millions of dollars having an incredible network. But now let's turn back into some internal data, and it is the foundation. So, internal data reveals how a customer treats you. Things like, are you experiencing payment drift? Is your DSO creeping? Rising dispute volumes, that's another one. Order volatility, credit line utilization, or those darn broken promises.
And Mike, I love how today we can capture this information in a different manner than we have. We're able to calculate behavioral change, especially on those broken promises, those tones that we had talked about before. And AI can identify those micro patterns, right? We're talking about little nuances now, those micro patterns that maybe humans overlook because they're so busy. But if you're in a peer networking, right, this gives you maybe some validation to that. If, two, three, or four companies are seeing some of this micro pattern changes, there's probably some sort of slippage and or you got confirmation that you shouldn't be ignoring what you're seeing and hearing at this point.
That's for sure. Volatility. I actually have a real story, Matt, that happened to me. And I was fortunate to have a salesperson that called me because they were like shaking their head and scratching, saying, I can't figure out why this particular customer wanted to order 4 times the average shipment. And this was a rather large company that was national. And what happened was we had a conversation and we were, of course, monitoring this account, and they were about ready to file bankruptcy. And what they wanted to do was stock up and not have to pay us. And fortunately for us, that internal information turned into saving the company millions of dollars of inventory that wasn't shipped and not paid for.
And Mike, how nice is it that today we can have tools that do that monitoring for us and look for those micro changes that are out there and create those alerts ahead of time? You obviously had a great team and were able to figure that out. But when you have so many customers, right, you want to be able to monitor all your customers and pick up on that. I think it's just great. We're in a great environment to be able to make those advances today.
It's another way you could have AI help on trending, and it's real time all the time.
Mhm.
External data shows how a customer behaves elsewhere. Think bureau scores, liens and judgments, public filings. You hear the word forbearance, you better start worrying. Industry downturns, trade payment trends. When you hear that a number of folks are seeing slowing across the board, something's going on. And then there could be macroeconomic pressures, Matt.
Yeah, and again, I'm going back to that concept of using AI because it can synthesize thousands of indicators in seconds, right? Literally all this information in seconds. And networking can fill in what the data doesn't say out loud, like, maybe their controller left abruptly, or they're looking for something out of the norm of your relationship with them. So, combination of all of this, it builds just stronger and stronger models for any individual.
Some folks are probably sitting here thinking, we're not being very empirical, are we? Well, I've always said, Matt, I'm going to throw this one at you. I've always said that when it comes to credit, it's 65% empirical and it's 35% what I'll call art. And some of these things we're talking about that you bring into not only the mathematics of it, but it's the bigger picture and everything else going on.
Like,
And one of them is customer sentiment and the missing piece most companies ignore. Sentiments reveal intentions, stress, or avoidance, usually before, the financials catch up. Some of the examples, slow replies, tense or evasive tone, lower engagement, hesitation in providing documents. And that one's so true. And again, I've had a lot of experience with that. Those folks that are willing to share their financials with an NDA, and for you to get comfortable, many cases, those are the accounts that are doing well. They've got an unleveraged or small leverage balance sheet, and they're willing to work with you.
Boy, you are on the artistic side today, and I'm going to have to start calling you Picasso with all the art analogies here. But you think about what Mike just said, and I agree, Mike, right? AI-driven sentiment analysis can do a lot more. It can detect things like urgency for us. How about frustration or avoidance patterns long before humans can, right? Because it's constantly scanning everything that we do. And once again, networking, again, having that strong peer group around you helps validate that. If other credit teams report the same behavioral shift, that's not an antidote. It's insight at this point. And you really need to be able to consider that and incorporate that into your modeling and your scoring of your customers.
Yeah, it's a lot like those puzzle pieces. And you turn each of those puzzle pieces into a probabilistic model. When you stack internal, external, and sentiment data, the goal is clear. Assign a real probability of default. Regression, machine learning, and decision trees could help too, depending what level you want to go to. I've always been one to say, more simple, the better, as long as it's predominantly accurate.
Yeah, you had something that's I think key for folks, and it's kind of like keep it simple, and you need to be able to do that, right? You can't have too many pieces of the puzzle out there. You need the appropriate pieces to complete the picture. And AI helps determine, this is key for folks, right? You can use AI to help determine the right weightings here, right? Like which factors really matter the most to you and how much. But when your peers also say something like, yeah, we see it too, or we've seen it too, past tense, that's the second opinion in your model that your model needs. And so it's again, it's an additive strength to the modeling process, including all of the prior history, et cetera, that you have. It just makes it so much stronger. But Mike, let's move it on because we got a lot to talk about, and I want to make sure that we're cognizant of time here. But giving credit where credit is due, right? Before we move to a topic that I want to address, which is reserves. This is a perfect moment to highlight something that doesn't happen enough, giving credit where credit is due. Why don't you take it? I know you have some thoughts on this.
Sure. Yeah. This is where credit folks really earn their value. If your risk models work, if warnings fire early, if exposure gets trimmed in time, if a default is prevented, nobody sees the disaster you avoided. They just see a smooth quarter and assume it was easy. It's like that duck out on the water, right? They're gliding on the top of the water, but those feet underneath are paddling away. And these are the things you need to bring to management's attention so that they know what you've done.
And like in today's environment, I think this is really critical. This is where having the right models in place allow you to shine. And things are moving much more quickly than they have in the past. The cycle times are compressed. There's a lot more activity out there. We know bankruptcies are up significantly. Past dues are in place, right? So having some of these things in place allow you to be quicker in your reactions and have more visibility. But I would go to that stability that you create is the result of credit teams really analyzing every piece. And that's what I'm trying to get to is compressed cycle times, et cetera, where you're able to analyze all of the pieces to the puzzle, including some things we've talked about, right? Like internal behavior, external risks that are out there, that sentiment that's happening, right? Picking up on those conversational tones that are out there, peer intel, And a lot of this can be driven by AI driven insights. And again, another strength to becoming more valuable to your organization.
That's organizational value. And that's exactly where credit is due.
You're exactly right, Mike, right? Again, letting you as an individual and your organization shine and stepping up in today's environment. Now, let's again switch gears slightly here. Let's talk about a little bit about connecting the model to bad debt reserves, because I think this is another opportunity for folks. And a real scoring model ties directly to your reserves. I want you to think about it in this fashion. It allows you for better insight to probability of default. And you define what default is. Is it default because a company's going out of business? Is it default because now you have slow pay, you're impacting your cash flow of your business, et cetera? And also it allows you to look at the, loss given default, which we just talked about. And again, exposure at default, maybe because they're going to slow in their payments, so your exposure is greater. You define what's important to you, but again, a real scoring model ties directly to your reserves because it allows you to have better insight for default as you define it for your business. And we all know each business is different. Each business has to evaluate their thresholds of pain and what it means to them.
Yeah, and when AI feeds these values with real data, your reserve becomes empirical, not emotional. And when networking alerts you to cracks before they show in the ledger, reserves stop being fire drills. Oh, and I know I've had my experience in those at least 3 or 4 times at a minimum.
I think everybody.
I just think it's really important to just connect all those pieces.
I like what you said too. I think you just used the word reserves become empirical, right? You start to have strict data sets behind it. It takes the emotion out of it and it becomes almost very mechanical in a sense, but you have great data driving those mechanical decisions, factual detail and empirical data that's really pushing things along and taking the emotion out of it, which is so critical these days.
Yes. Identifying and prioritizing high risk accounts is another piece of the reserve. So a strong model makes high risk accounts impossible to miss because you're looking for that rising probability of default, that sentiment decline, the external deterioration, the internal behavior changes, and peer warnings.
Yeah. And you need to visualize that, right? And everybody has their own methodology of visualizing that. What I found was most important to me in my career was, again, keep it simple, right? When I looked at the risk levels, I tended to look at it along 3 different tiers. No matter whether I was building scoring models for manufacturing, pharmaceutical, consumer, or wherever it had been, I kept it simple and I had 3 tiers. And what worked for me the most was, let's talk about tier number one was that immediate threat, that high risk level. Whether you want to, say it's high risk or you want to code it red or whatever you want to do. I had a tier one. Then I had a second tier out there, which was my emerging concerns. Maybe you want to call that, medium risk or, label it as a yellow. So again, you can see the color coordination out here. Those were the ones that I had to keep my eye on because they could go either way. So they had a different level of concern than the high risk. And then I had my tier three, which was my low risk level, and that was green. And again, I created a 3 level, and I think most folks create some sort of a level. What worked for me was 3. Somebody may have more than that. I think most folks are low, medium, and high risk level. But it gives you the ability to rank your customers, and then the networking confirms them, and the actions can follow. And you can do it on an account level. And what I also love about this methodology is you can then also use that against your portfolio or subsets of your portfolio. So you have multiple visuals going on and you're able to share and communicate that, just as you said before, on a very consistent methodical basis. So let's move on to the next because we got a lot still to chat about, but I want to hit, how AI brings the puzzle together. Because we talked about all these different pieces today. And AI fuses, I want to go back, it fuses the internal data that we have, right? This is important with external signals that are out there. And I'm going back to, and the sentiment into one unified living risk profile. Again, very consistent approach.
Yeah, Matt, it doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted or swayed by a promising email. It just evaluates the patterns and calibrates as new data flows in.
Yeah, it's just absolutely wonderful, right? And AI analyzes payment behavior, reads sentiment, tracks market shifts, important for us, learns from outcomes, and assigns that dynamic risk level that's out there. So you have consistency and visibility to your customer, your subsets of your portfolio, and your entire portfolio, all at one point in time.
But the final layer is human peer networking. No algorithm can replace a fellow credit manager calling to say, heads up, they're wobbling. That's the kind of intel that saved more profit than any model you'll ever deploy. No truer words spoken. So, final takeaways. If you want a model that works, you heard it, internal data, external indicators, sentiment, AI to bring those three pieces together, and then your world networking, real world networking, will make that model the most encompassing risk scoring model that any organization can ever have.
And Mike, I'm going to add that take all of those pieces and keep it as simple as you can. Don't try to be too sophisticated along that line. Try to keep it as simple as you can, just so you have better scoring. And you put those pieces together and you get a model that can predict early, protect the portfolio, stabilize your reserves, and it gives leadership a clear, confident view of risk. Instead of monthly surprise parties, again, you want to be able to be clear and concise and communicate. If you want to go deep on mitigation, CRF has an on-demand course managing AR risk mitigation. It takes you through the arc of mitigation. So think about that from customer acquisition through customer disposition. We have a course available to our members and non-members. If anybody wants to take that, it's on our website. Or if you have questions, you can ask us about it.
That's a great thought, Matt. That class can really help folks put together the data to inform and, most importantly, influence the company to act when things start going bad and the puzzle pieces are flashing crimson red. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Feel free to share this with anyone still using outdated spreadsheets to predict next quarter's credit losses. Let's build something really smarter with the knowledge from this podcast.
And Mike, I think that's a wrap. Did a great job. There's a lot of detail in here for folks. If you have questions, reach out to us. And don't forget to like and follow our podcasts and mark your calendars for the upcoming one where we're going to cover best practices in credit risk mitigation. Thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe and like.
Thanks, Matt. I'm looking forward to the next podcast as well.
Take care, folks.
Bye now.